So let's understand how do we what is the concepts involved in a virtual machine. And when we say just virtual machine, most of the times we just say that we know how to create a virtual machine or not. But I want you guys to understand these concepts which are involved at this point of time in a high level with a virtual machine. And as we go forward, we are gonna see majority of it how to do that. But this is more of anything to understand how the concepts are so much related to virtual machine. If you have any questions, you can post it in the chat section. Uh, so let's understand first what is the importance of regions in a virtual machine. So, see, virtual machine end of the day is an instance in an hardware, which was a server hardware, which is located in Azure, Microsoft Azure. So, using the Hyper-V technology, virtualization, we are creating virtual machines in Azure, and they have like just like our computer hardware, like the laptop and desktop, they have the Curve 64 core, or accordingly more than that, a motherboard supporting that kind of processor, and the RAM and the NIC cards and everything in place. Now using there is a high virtualization technology set up in that, which is called Hyper-V. And when we trying to create a virtual machine in Portal, we are going and actually, in fact, the portal is sending a request to ARN, saying that kindly provision a virtual machine in so and so region. So its region is so important because the hardware is located in that particular geographical location in Azure. So we have almost 60 plus at this point of regions, everything, the upcoming regions and everything. And we can actually go and choose one of the regions and everything. Now, other than regions, the other concept which we have, one more is availability options. So inside a region, we, as previously discussed, a region can be a single data center or a multiple data centers. And one is actually termed as a single data center, which is region. The other one is called a zone, which has three data centers. Now, when you wanted to create multiple virtual machines, we start thinking about availability options. We wanted our machines to be highly available because when we tried hosting a website on virtual machine, or we are trying to learn a server workload, which could be an Active Directory server, or what do you say, any file share server or proxy server and everything. We wanted that to be that service to be available. So the Azure is providing two availability options here. One is availability set and one is availability zone. Availability set is actually focuses within the data center. How do you want it to place the virtual machines? Do you want it to place it in a different racks and all that? And do you wanted it to place in a different rack which has not of having the same power sockets and everything? Because either in terms of being in the same rack or having the same power sockets can have some kind of issues. There's a possibility, and just because you're having that change can actually bring you an better, more availability in some kind of cases. As we go into what is an availability set, I can actually discuss at that. But at this point of time, this is good enough. So within a region, we can actually use because Azure actually does a planned maintenance, and then unplanned activity can also happen. The planned maintenance is they wanted to update their hardware using the BIOS updates and everything which has to be done, and they're running a virtualization software. That means they have on top of an OS and everything. So they have to update their own security settings and everything. So because of this, there could be, if your machine is running in that hardware, it can go down. So when you don't want your machines to go down and everything, you actually use availability set, because it's just not one machine, or it's multiple machines. There is a possibility that if you're not using an availability set, all the machines you're creating are in the same rack server and everything. So the rack server goes down, or the rack server is in a planned active maintenance activity, they can't actually promise an availability at that point of time. So availability set is used for providing high availability option. And what is an availability zone? What if you have a data center failure? What if the rack in machines you are placed in the rack are in one single data center? You'll be in one single data center, and what if that fails? So you can actually use the availability zone concept, which is trying to say that availability zone concept, which is trying to say that you can actually place the virtual machines in different data centers. So the chance of one data center going down is very less, but still even goes down. You have the other two data centers, which is making your service to keep running. Why do we have to even have to go this kind of option? Remember, server is something which has to show a RAS functionality, reliability, and availability, serviceability. So availability is one of the major key factors. So a business which is generating crores of money, they don't even want to lose a second of business, or what, a couple of seconds of business. So that's the reason why we have right now, as of now, the in terms of VMs, we have availability set and availability zone. We have other stuff even to provide high availability, but these are the most common uh, ask either from an interview or what you, when you design a set of virtual machines, you go with this. And what is images? So most of the times, the virtual machines are being created in an organization to run a specific workload, either an application or it's just an not application. You might have a server which is running a web application, an application, and Active Directory, and file share, virtualization stuff, Citrix, or probably proxy servers, a database, and all these things. And each has a purpose, a workload to be running. So when you wanted to, previously when we tried hosting a website on Apache. When we tried hosting a website on Apache, we had made sure that first we updated the packages and we installed the uh, Apache in that. What if we wanted already an Apache to be installed in the machines? Either you can choose an image which is there in the OS market, and so when you're choosing whether it is Ubuntu or Windows 2019 and all that, we also have similarly an option of choosing from the marketplace already pre-installed one like LAMP server and all that, which will have better functionality and all that. But you might actually use a base image, like instead of choosing the market image, you might just choose like a base image which is Ubuntu or a Windows 2019 data center, and on top of it you can actually install your softwares, and that whatever is being installed, everything in your machine, because it's to either to run a web application or your Active Directory server or any other proxy servers, file share servers, and everything, database, whatever you wanted to run, the respective prerequisites. What are the prerequisites? Those softwares. Just like for a website as an Apache, probably for database, you would actually have to install some either a PostgreSQL or all this stuff. So when you wanted or the necessary software prerequisites which to happen in place. So all that you can actually, instead of every time when you create a virtual machine, you have to go and create that, keep doing that activity. You can make, once you install all that software, you can create an OS like that, and a custom OS of yours. So using means when I say create your custom OS, you're not creating entirely a uh, from scratch an OS. You're using the same Windows on top of it, or an so Ubuntu or a Linux OS. On top of it, whatever the prerequisite installed software, you're making that as a base image. So next time when you try to use that custom image to create a machine, virtual machine, you can automatically, you know, to install the software because that is already installed on that. So it's just used, so it is not used inside the if you wanted you can place it, but in the marketplace. See, but end of the day, it's not that you developed this uh, Windows OS and all that. So there are all this which you have to remember. Only thing is you're using a prerequisite software built respectively. So accordingly, in organizations, what happens is they maintain their own custom OS images according to the pre-required prerequisites which are needed for specific workloads. So there are different will be different types of servers, and they will maintain different images for each of it, and they'll keep updating because they need to have security updates in each of this updated what do you say, security updates in each of that OS types of OS which where you're trying to create that custom OSs and everything for your respective workloads. So I'll just pause the recording. So next one is spot instance. What is a spot instance? When we wanted to, we will create virtual machines in Azure in our organizations for all to for if also for the internal use for a development testing and everything. So, or you are running, so Azure is providing for users, most of the users, that if you're trying to create an instance where you don't need to actually worry about uh, a workload to be running and, every time, it's fine, but you wanted a discounted price. You're doing it for a testing purpose or some functionality development and everything, so you wanted to test. Now so if Azure will have a huge infrastructure set in place in each of the regions, and when you wanted to go and use spot instance, they give that the hardware, unused hardware, for a discounted price. But there are two types of ways in spot instance. One is delete and sorry, one is eviction and one is price capacity. So either if their need of because more right now in that region, more customers are coming inside Azure and provisioning more services and everything, your virtual machine will automatically be deallocated if they needed that capacity, or otherwise, so without your permission, without anything. But if you're normally using your virtual machine without spot instance, they are not they you bought the seat. It's like you're going to a theater, and if no one is coming to that seat, you can watch the movie, but if someone is coming, you have to get up. So, but the only difference here in that kind of cases, the ticket price is way lesser. It is 10 times lesser. So if you end up paying 250 bucks, you need to only just pay probably 25 rupees. So if someone is actually joining that one, see in that seat to watch so similarly, if someone is trying to use more of the hardware and the Azure, and the percentage of unused is not more, it's lesser than 20% and everything, then automatically your spot instance should be deallocated and everything. So as the name says, spot instance, spot. So they provide that, but in case if they need it, they will uh, stop your machine. They'll deallocate. They don't delete from your portal. They're just deallocated. And spot instances only can be created in wherever you're paying. So if you're going with an enterprise subscription or pay as you go subscription and everything, that is a time where you can actually use spot instance. But if you are using a free trial, already free trial is giving a free tilt, so they don't give you an option spot instance. And only in few regions unused hardware are they going to give for spot instances. Not every region is eligible to create spot instances. And size, what does size mean? Size of a virtual machine is just the capacity of the processor and uh, RAM and the media. Okay, so the if you wanted to go with a high performance uh, and everything, you can, or you wanted ultra disk facilities, accelerated networking, and all that. So based on the family, you wanted to have a high computized or high graphic rendering machines, or if you wanted what do you say, more memory in more RAM and all that. So based on that, you can actually choose servers. So so there are different types of servers in that. When you're trying to create servers, your purpose, your utilization in an organization could be of, you might need more memory, or you might need like that is called memory optimized servers, or you might need more processor, compute optimized servers, or you might need more you need more for a graphical rendering, probably for a gaming, or probably for a research point of view, data analysis and all that. In AI point of view, you're running workloads in the virtual machine, and all that kind of sorts, we actually go for a family, a different types of family. So you see standard D to, when you're trying to create, you see one core, one V core, two RAM, two V core, 64 RAM and all that. So that's the size, and stand in that before, if you see standard D, D1S or something, DS1, DVS1 or like that. So that D is a family. There's E, there is what do you say, F and all that, but that defines the size and everything. Now credentials. Now based on the virtual machine type, if it's a Windows you have, no, normally it uses the Kerberos authentication, and you just have to use username and password. Okay, and remember the username term should not be there in the password. So username should have a different name and entirely, and the password entirely different words. And for a Linux, you have two types of it. One is SSH keys, one is password. So using password, which is username and a password. If you're using SSH key, either you can create an SSH key in your local machine, and you can upload that SSH key, public key there while you're creating a VM, or you can generate a key by Azure itself, and they will give you the public key or the private key, or you can actually uh, store your public key in the Azure Key Vault, which is a secret management solution to store the secrets like passwords and all that in Azure in a highly secured manner. And you can even retrieve a key if you're storing it from there. So there are different, there are these are two types of authentication. One is SSH and one is password for a Linux OS, not for Windows. For Linux OS, for a Windows, you just have these credentials and everything. Now, let me give a pause here. So I'll just show you. So when we say about regions, uh, if we go here, so there are the in region section. When I create a virtual machine, there are these all the regions. Now, so this means you're going in that region, in that geographical location in Azure, and in that data center, you're creating an instance of VM. That means your instance is not another region. Suppose you're creating in West Europe, it is not there in Central US. That's what it is. And similarly, availability options, you can see that here. So there are, as of now, you're seeing the third one, which is next, which is not at this point of time, you're not discussing it. Availability zone and availability set. As said, availability set is within single data center. You wanted to distribute your work VMs as per planned maintenance or unplanned activities instances. And availability zone is you're making each instance in a different data center in the same region, but when you're choosing this availability zone, you're gonna choose uh, the same region. So in West Europe, might be if that is have if it's a zone, then only you will be in a position to create. If it is that region is not having multiple data centers, then you can't be creating the machine in that one. Okay, so first you have to be aware of that when you're choosing the availability zone or availability set. Now images. So when you're trying to create your images, you're using the custom, normally the pre-built, which is there in the marketplace. So if I go, so whatever your voices which you're seeing is what you can find in the market. You can actually go more OSs in the marketplace, which has only just you have to pay. Now, if you are creating on top of it your prerequisite softwares and installed everything and you created an image out of it, then you'll have your images here and you'll select that automatically whenever you're creating. So you don't need to end up installing the softwares and everything. Now, what is a spot instance? Spot instance is available here in the same uh, here, run with a spot distance, and there are two types. One is stop and or deallocate or delete. So if you wanted to choose a delete means machine will be deleted. If you're choosing stop or deallocate, it will be stopped if they need that capacity, more capacity and everything. So the broader discussion is there. What is the capacity only and price or capacity, that we'll discuss later. But whenever Azure is providing an unused hardware for a lower cost, but in case there are more requests which are coming in for that hardware and everything, they have to evict your machines, either to stop it or you can go for a delete on. So based on that, the price will actually just more discounted if you're choosing a delete option and all that. And the authentication type, if it's a Linux machine, you have two SSH key or a password. Password, you just give a username and password. SSH key, you're going to say there are three times. Either you can ask Azure to create a new key pair, which is a public key and a private key SSH key, or you can ask uh, that I stored in an Azure key vault, and you can give that key vault name and everything. As of now, we don't have that. That's fine. And you can even create your keys from your local machine and or from somewhere, and you can just copy that public key here, and you can create your machine. Now, similarly, I go into disks. So okay, that's what I think I explained till now. Size, I already explained. These are all the different sizes of machines which we have, different family sizes, and based on that, you have to choose. So it's recommended to decide before itself what family of servers you wanted. And the spot instance is done. Okay, now disks. When we go inside disks, there is OS disk, temp disk, and data disk. What is an OS disk? So when you're creating a VM, there are disks which will be created, okay, along with it. So you're creating OS disk called OS disk either, which is a premium SSD, standard SSD, or a standard HDD, and all that. So I think I discussed in the previous my basic videos. That what is the difference between SSD and HDD? HDD, standard solid state drive, which is a chip which is more faster comparatively than HDD, which can store more amount of space but for a lower cost. So based on that, your cost pricing, when you finally create, they'll say this much is what they'll charge you per hour. That point of time, the charge will go down if you're going for a lower one. But for a OS disk, it's more recommended to have an SSD disk than HDD disk. Remember that. Why? Because SSD is having faster IOPS, faster capacity, and better capacity and all that. Now, what is a temp disk? So you will see the temp disk, temporary disk, which is in the machine while you log into that one from a SSH point of view, or if it's a Windows machine, then you do RDP and all that. You will have a temp disk, and what is a point temp disk? You will have the content there if you are storing anything at that point of time. But if you stop that, whatever data is there in the temp disk will be deleted automatically. Okay. Uh, so if you are just like in your laptop or your desktops, if you're trying to work or you visit sites and all that, there will be a cache which will be all that temporary files which will be stored in the temporary disk. And of just when we do the same things in our server, that it will be stored in temp disk. And once you stopped it, the entire data of any temporary caches and all that or files which you have stored in temporary disk will be deleted. Remember that. So why do we need to have a data disk? So you can attach a separate disk, creating different disks here, and that becomes a data disk, because might be you're running an application, might be you're running a database and all that. What if the machine got deleted? What if the machine got corrupted? What if the machine has been stopped? What if so the data whichever is there, which generated and everything, should not be lost at any point of time. So you created a separate disk for storing that kind of critical data. Not just critical data, if you wanted the data, you don't want the data to be in the uh, your laptop. So just kind of assume the situations like you have your laptop and it is not working at this point of time. Whatever the data you stored is lost. So that's the reason why you use a hard drive, a disk, and you upload your important photos, videos, files, and everything into that, so that even the machine got corrupted or OS has been corrupted, you will be in a position to format it and set it back, and you can use this data whichever there in the hard drive. It's more easier. So that's why we attach a separate disk. And what is an encryption? Encryption, there are server side encryption and a client side encryption. Client side encryption means it is us, client. We are the clients for Azure. Server side encryption means Azure is the server. So if you wanted server side encryption, that means you're leaving to Azure to encrypt it. So when you are going for the encryption type, so there is a platform managed key. Okay, so platform managed key is saying that you wanted to leave the encryption keys with the Azure itself. And when you say customer managed key, you are gonna maintain the encryption keys of that. What is the encryption here? You wanted to encrypt your machine data. So because your machine is residing in the in a data center which is there in a geographical location in Azure. So when you don't want anyone to be aware of even the employees and all that. It's no one will, anyways, they have lot of compliance standards not to leak your data. But if you are uncomfortable still that someone is holding your data and you don't want that to happen because of many reasons, then you can actually choose to encrypt your machines. By default, Azure is saying that, see, we are encrypting the machines at rest, so even anyone tries to hack and everything, they can't get it because we are the persons who are maintaining that encryption keys, and you don't have to worry about that. But if you are not still comfortable, then you can have your own encryption keys that is customer managed. And if you're going for double encryption, you are going to may ask to Azure to maintain a encryption key, and you're also yourself to you'll be maintaining one more key. And that's an about encryption here. What is virtual network? Whenever a machine is getting created, it is mandatory to have a network, because you need to assign a public, no, private IP address. Whether you wanted to have a public IP address for a virtual machine or not is your choice. You can actually say that I don't want a public IP address by going into networking session and choosing public IP as none. But if you wanted to have a public IP, then you can create a new. But for an option of private IP, you don't have an option to say that I don't want a private IP address. A machine is getting created, it needs a network to communicate sometimes some details. How can you get to know whether how is Azure is showing you that the machine is stopped running and all that? It is able to track, it is able to connect to that machine through a private network. And so through your private network, it's not through a private network, it is connecting through your private network. And that's why you have, when you're creating by default a machine, you are also creating a virtual network, and that virtual network in a specific subnet, it's giving an IP address, uh, private IP address. And why is it is private IP? Because this is a like this virtual network is a logical networking CIDR which was given in that one. you are being given yeah, IP address of your machine. So it's not connected to any networks. Either it is just with internally in the Azure, you're creating a network for yourself, and no one has access to it other than you. So it is not connected to public, so it's not internet, it's not a public network. But if you create a public IP, that means you're creating an endpoint which is connected to the internet. And through that, that's the reason why when I hosted a website and I copied that public IP address and I pasted it, as I'm also connected to internet, I was able to send the request to the machine. And machine has also connected to that public IP. So that's why it has received from that specific whatever the request which I sent an HTTP request and was sending that website as a response. Okay, so but a virtual network is we in organizations we don't create public IPs for all the machines. Instead, we place in front end an application gateway or a load balancer or a traffic manager to do those activities. So there will be only one public IP with having firewalls established and everything in place. So virtual network is inside the network. Organization will have its own network, and it is saying that you can create your own. I'm giving an option to create a network so that for these machines you might be using a database as an option or anything. So entirely you can link that to a virtual network. That's so important, guys. So understand why we need a virtual network. And you while you go into networking section, you will be having an option by default. When you select the details, you will get your virtual network, and you can, if you wanted, you can modify accordingly. There's more to it in terms of what modifications you can do in terms of IP address space and everything, but this is as we keep going, we'll talk more about it. Let me pause the recording. Now let's understand what is network interface card. If you remember in server hardware, I was discussing that it should server should be in a position of connecting to a network, any network, either it's a private network or anything, not just in terms of Azure, your laptop, anything is connected to a network is through because of it has a networking component in the hard motherboard. Similarly, Azure is saying that I'll give you a NIC, okay, through which the entire connecting the machines are connected and all that. So they create a virtual NIC which can show the same functionality of a NIC network component in your like just like in a motherboard, and that will be attached to it. So through which so all the data transfer, the protocols, decompressing or and encapsulating the packets and all that will happen. So if we talk about a networking point of a OSI model, there is a network layer, application layer, data layer, physical layer, and all that, presentation layer, transport layer, network layer. So based on which type of protocol, HTTP protocol, HTTPS, FTP protocol, TCP protocol, TCP IP, or FTP, UDP, and all that. So the different protocols based on what protocol you're trying to send a data from one place to another place. So when that is happening, when it comes back with a technology that this protocol coming and interacting with, NIC is the one which will be in first and understand that and accordingly make an OS understand this is the data end of the day and everything. Now security group. So NIC is very important, and while you're creating a machine, you don't get an option to create your custom NIC. But if you're going through PowerShell CLI, you have an option to create your own NIC. But through just with or with ARM, you have the option, but through Power directly through portal, you don't have that option. And security group is to filter the network. So when a set of connections are coming, so in the previous videos when we have tried hosting a website from a virtual machine, we are sending an HTTP request. We went and specifically into networking component, we went and said that allow 80 port also, and that is how the HTTP request is coming. So the security group which you're trying to create, uh, if we say, the security group which you are trying to create. So you would have you should be allowing the 80 ports. So what specific ports, what protocol they have to follow, whether it is an allowed or denied, everything can be managed from the security group. Network security, it's a filtering the network. End of the day, it's filtering the network through ports, protocols, and CIDR, which is nothing but the IP address space range and everything. Now, load balancer. When you create multiple virtual machines, we need what do you say? Some a solution which can balance the traffic and accordingly send all the requests to not just one server, but accordingly send it to different servers. Now that is where you use load balancer, where the load balancer name itself is suggesting you balance the load and everything. Now log in with Azure AD. So instead of going with just when you're creating, you'll use credentials, but along with it, you can have an option of in Azure Active Directory, what are the users they can log in when you're trying to go with a login with Azure AD into the machines. Now, backup option, we wanted to have a backup in place where, when you are trying to run a specific workload, because what if the machine got corrupted? Okay, you have to re-get the entire OS from whatever exact state of that point of time. So you, if you have a backup in already in place, you can just restore that backup. Update management, which is also called as patching. So you have to update your servers, like just like Windows update in your Windows machines. You perform a updates on your server similarly. Okay, and if the virtual machine is comes under IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, one of the reason is because of that, is because the infrastructure in infrastructure IaaS OS is your responsibility. It's a shared responsibility if you remember PaaS, SaaS, IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS. And as VM is coming under IaaS, which is in infrastructure as a service, so it is your responsibility to take care of OS to be updated and everything. If you're asking to Azure to do it, it will do it. But if that is one, you have an update management tool specifically in Azure which can patch entire machines which you have in your subscription. Monitoring. You wanted to monitor whether it's running correctly, what is the amount of data consumption, what is the CPU performance, is it being overloaded and all that from a monitoring point of view. So what is custom script extension? You wanted to run the while the machine getting created, you wanted some set of softwares to be also installed along with it. You don't want to separately go and log into the machine and install. So whenever a machine is getting installed, you wanted to just run the script which will go and do that perform installation and everything. That is when you use custom script extension, and for a machine one script extension is allowed. What is an application security group? When you have huge number of servers which are running different types of workloads, handling a security group just makes more tougher. Why? Because you need to have more network security groups based on each workload, type of workload. If it is an Active Directory, you need to allow some ports and all that. So you can't keep maintaining different security groups and all that to achieve this feat. So instead, you will use a security group, application security group, which is a Azure solution specifically designed to logically group VMs and everything, as the name itself says, group security group. So it will group the entire machines as one particular name, and you can control that from security group. So it's fine if you're not understanding. It's a logical grouping of machines to ensure a smart filtration of networking and easier maintenance compare using the security group, network security group itself. And you can connect to machines using RDP, SSH, and even Bastion service. We'll talk about that. So through RDP, which is for Windows, but for Linux machines also you can use, but you have to go and specifically install before. While you're creating a Linux machine, you can't RDP into it. You can only do SSH. But after that, after SSH, you can install RDP client in the machines, and then you can perform RDP. But by default, our Linux machines don't have RDP. That's what I wanted to say. Okay. But if you wanted to do RDP for Linux machines, first you have to go and SSH into the machine, log into the machine from SSH, and then you have to install RDP client. And that is when you will be in a position to, even you have to allow RDP port in the security group, and that is when you can able to log in. What is Bastion service? You wanted to log in not from your laptop, from your PowerShell or from a remote desktop session and all that, but from a browser. Through a browser also you can log in, and that is for what is for Bastion service, and it's more. And it if you are having access to access the machines, then you will be in a position to log in into that machine using Bastion service. Otherwise, even the VMs have Bastion service, but you don't have access to VMs, then you don't have the access to log into that. And just in time access, so you will want to say this is a more security solution, you need to enable Azure Defender service, a native solution, which is obviously pricey. And you want to say in terms when you enable this kind of service to a virtual machine, so any user who wants to log in will just have to first temporarily go and create that I wanted to access this machine through an RDP and SH, and please allow me. And you create a request and someone allows, or you got it for an hour like that, only for that. So just in time, for just for minute or 10 minutes or 1 hour, 2 hours, you will be in a position to access the VM. So only for critical workloads, the very important workloads, no one want you don't need to you don't want anyone to go and access. Even for specific administrators, you don't want them to access whenever they wanted, or even if they're accessing, you are gonna keep an audit team to do that. Because see, if you go for a financial organization like banks and everything, your data is stored somewhere. And even it's just a company, the user, the company employee, you don't still, the organization CEO still, they don't want to trust the employee, because it's a financial data, it's someone's personal data, and bank is responsible to hold it. So that's the reason why they can't access the data. So that point of time, for those kind of databases, server, if they're keeping that in a machine, they'll keep just in time access for that machines, so that they log in only for 1 hour, and even that 1 hour they'll be tracked entirely. So it's a costly one solution, which is available from a Defender point of view. You pay $15 something for a server if you wanted to enable a Defender service. And identity is a system assigned, user assigned identities. So you can create when you wanted your machines to access other services in Azure. So use system assigned or a user assigned identity. System assigned is user is creating it. User assigned is you are creating an identity. So there are different ways to create it. We will go in detail when we're talking about it. Site replication. So replication is another way. What if the entire region is going down? You're placing a service in your one region, either from a single data center or multiple data centers. What if the entire region is going down? That means the entire data centers are going down. So the other way is site replication. So you replicate your server in another secondary region. So if you're creating an East US, you can replicate it to and probably a West US and all that. So you choose separate of secondary region, and your data will be replicated simultaneously, not simultaneously, asynchronously, with a delay of some 5 seconds or 10 seconds, 20 seconds and all that, or couple of minutes, not seconds, couple of minutes, 1 to 3 minutes. There will be a delay in terms of replication, but you're having a chance of not losing a data more. And obviously, when you're hosting another in another region, in another VM, then you're paying double the charge. So don't imagine just one. Always imagine in one server. Don't imagine one server. Imagine 1,000 servers. So you end up paying a monthly 10,000 for a server. That means 1,000 servers. You are paying almost around 1 crore, I guess. 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, and 1 crore. Yeah, 1 crore per rent for this 1,000 machines. What if you are replicating all the servers in another region? So you end up paying 1 more crore. Are you okay with it? No, most of the people will not be okay with it. Not most, no one will be okay with it. So you only replicate very critical workloads where you don't have wanted to even have a chance of losing even per second and everything. Now, that kind of cases you go for site replication. But even they said there's a delay and all that. So there are other services which there to do that. That's why we have Azure Functions and serverless computing to do a more broader functionality when we wanted that to do a critical things. But yeah, that alone not solve the job. There are other queues and service buses to do that. But yes, let's not go beyond the topics at this point of time. Serial console. So when you don't want it to log into the machine, but you want it to run from the portal itself, from the Azure portal itself, you wanted to perform actions on the virtual machine. Inside, what has to happen? You can use serial console for it. So there are more than what I said just right now. There are few more redeploy, reapply, and all that. Even integrating the machine to a DevOps and everything, we are not touching that many things. So when you try to learn about a virtual machine, I recommend you to learn all this. But are this part of administration, Azure Administration 104? See, learning for certification is an interest. But learning for in terms of getting an interview and all that, that is a different one. Job expectations lies in a different aspects, and certification is the way of evaluating an individual that he knows majority of it. But when you wanted to actually be capable of doing things for a virtual machine production oriented point of view, it is always good to learn all this stuff. And the activity logs, what does an activity log? So before that, let me pause the recording. So there are other few things which I wanted to explain. So irrespective of whether it is a virtual machine or not, there are a few more things which you need to know. Is one is activity log. Whatever activity is happening, if you are on a service, if you are deleting it or adding it and all, changing any configuration change and everything. So every service have a different features, and they'll have uh, the blades. So when you create, suppose a virtual machine, sorry, a resource group, just sample because we need to create it faster. So each one will have the same activity log, access control, tags, and everything. So whenever I'm creating anything in that resource group point of view, that entire activities, suppose I'm creating virtual machines, 10 virtual machines and everything, after a couple of 3 minutes and 4 minutes, the data will be ingested here. So you exactly know what is happening inside the resource group. Similarly, if you are having an active, if you seeing an activity log in a virtual machine, in when you click on a virtual machine, that means whatever is happening in terms of virtual machine activities, that entire things you can track on activity log. So how many you can see? You can see for 90 days or 180 days, I guess. You can only see for 180 days. The rest, if you wanted to see, then you need to use Log Analytics workspace to store the data. No, before I just confirming, I wanted to say activity. Yeah, it's 90 days. So the data is retained for 90 days and it's deleted. If you wanted to store for more amount of days, to why do we do it? Because you don't have one machine, thousands of machines, thousands of services you are going and creating in Azure. Then you wanted to try, you have given access to lot many people. You wanted to have an activity check of what exactly is happening in each of that in your entire subscription. That is when you go for an activity log and all that. Access control, IAM. So when you wanted to control who has access, what access, and everything, you go for access control. Tags, you tag your resources. Mostly we use it for billing purposes, tracking in terms of organization point of view, which are the machines which are exposed to public, which are the machines which are exposed to private. So you can use tags, which are the machines which are used by a specific department, development team, testing team, and all that. So based on that, you can check how much that development team uh, is billed for in a single subscription, how much testing team is billed for in that same subscription through tags. Advisor recommendations. So Azure is saying that if you go with advisor recommendations, it will recommend you some solutions for security, better performance, better solution features to set in place. And you have policies. If you enabled any Azure policy, organizational compliance standards, uh, c- uh, just to ensure that no machine should have, suppose you mentioned that machine should not have a public IP. Now policy will go and check whether it has a public IP or not. So just not for a virtual machine, but any other. These are the common things for any other service also, just not for virtual machine. If you're going with storage account, also the same thing applies. That's what you're seeing here. Any so this is it. Thank you guys.